4 months. That's how long it had been since Daniel passed, and every morning still felt like waking up underwater. The air around me was thick with silence. His toothbrush still sat in the holder, his slippers still by the bed. But the one thing I hadn't touched was his car. It sat in the driveway like a ghost. Dusty, silent, just waiting. Every time I walked past it, I felt like I could hear his laughter from the driver's seat, teasing me about how I always adjusted the mirrors too low. But this morning, something in me shifted. I couldn't keep pretending forever. It was time. I grabbed the keys with a shaking hand and stepped outside. The summer air was warm, but my skin broke out in goosebumps. I opened the car door slowly, almost expecting him to be there. The seat still smelled like him, cologne and old coffee. I sat down, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Okay, Daniel, let's do this." I planned to sell the car that week, so I needed to clean it out. I started with the back seat, old receipts, one of Sophie's hair clips, an empty water bottle. Then I moved to the front, and that's when I opened the glove compartment. At first, it looked normal: insurance papers, a phone charger, a worn-out pen. But something else caught my eye. Tucked way in the back, hidden under a folder, a small black USB drive. I held it in my hand, staring. No label, no explanation, just there. I almost tossed it aside, thinking it might be nothing. But something about it felt off. Daniel wasn't a hide things in the glove box kind of man. At least, I didn't think he was. I plugged it into my laptop. A folder popped up. My heart began to race. Inside were dozens of files. Some were documents, others photos. And then there were audio recordings. The folder had a name: For Grace. My fingers trembled as I opened the first document. It was a letter. And in that moment, my breath left my body. He was writing to me, but not the way I expected. His words were heavy, careful, like he was trying to explain something he knew I'd never want to hear. There was a name I didn't recognize. Isabelle, and another one. Leo. I opened a photo next. It was of Daniel, standing beside a woman I'd never seen before. She had kind eyes, and beside her stood a little boy, maybe 7 or 8, holding Daniel's hand like he'd done it 100 times before. I blinked. No, 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 no. I clicked another photo. The same boy, this time sitting on Daniel's shoulders at a park, smiling, laughing. I covered my mouth as the room spun. My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear myself think. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't crying either. It was something in between, a strange numbness that froze me in place. Who were they? Why were they with my husband? Why was this hidden? My mind started spiraling. I felt like I didn't know the man I'd shared a bed with for 10 years. The man who helped me raise our daughter. The man I buried with tears in my eyes and love in my heart. And now I was staring at a picture of him holding another child. A child who looked just like him. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know where to begin. All I knew was this: nothing in my life would ever be the same again. What would you do if you found out your late husband was hiding something like this? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications if you want to hear what happens next. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the edge of my bed holding the USB like it was made of fire. The files played over and over in my head. Daniel's voice, the letters, the photos of that woman and the little boy. Isabelle and Leo. Their names were now carved into my mind like they'd always belonged there. But they didn't. They weren't part of our life. Not my life. Not Sophie's. So why did Daniel make them a part of his? By morning, the numbness had given way to something else. Need. Not quite anger, not yet. But a need to know. I had to understand what this was. Who they were. Why he kept it from me. I went back to the USB. My eyes scanned the folders again, this time slower. I clicked open a folder labeled Transfers. There were monthly deposits to a woman named Isabelle R. Modest but regular. Over 4 years' worth. One of the transfers had an address attached. It was across town, a neighborhood I'd never visited. Not the kind of place Daniel would normally go. But there it was. Plain as day. And just like that, I found myself getting dressed. I told Sophie I was heading to the market. I didn't want her to ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. She just nodded, eyes on her cereal, unaware that her mother's world was unraveling. It took me 20 minutes to get to the address. The building was old but well kept. Paint peeling around the corners, small flower pots on some of the windowsills. A quiet street. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't even know what I was doing there. Was I going to knock? Ask her who she was? Ask her what my husband meant to her? Before I could even decide, the front door opened. And there she was, Isabelle. She stepped outside with a grocery bag in one hand and a little boy trailing behind her. My breath caught in my throat. He was around 8, maybe younger. His hair was thick and dark, just like Daniel's. Same ears, same smile. Leo. My chest tightened. I felt like I was looking through a window into a life I was never supposed to see. Isabelle knelt down and helped the boy tie his shoelace. Her voice was soft, almost musical. He said something that made her laugh, and in that moment, something inside me twisted. She didn't look like a villain. She didn't look like someone who had stolen anything. She looked tired, kind, real. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to believe she was some horrible secret Daniel kept out of shame. But watching her now, it didn't feel like that. Not exactly. And that scared me more. I sat in my car, frozen. They walked down the sidewalk, unaware of me. Just a mother and her son going about their day. The boy held her hand and skipped a little, then pulled a worn keychain out of his pocket. My heart nearly stopped. It was the same style as the one Daniel gave me years ago, made from leather, stitched with little initials. I recognized his handiwork instantly. This wasn't just money. This was care, attention, love, maybe. I didn't knock. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just watched until they turned the corner. Then I started the car and drove away. I didn't cry. Not then. But when I pulled into my driveway and saw Sophie's bike lying in the grass, that's when it hit me. There were 2 children in this story. One he raised with love, and one he kept in the shadows. And I was standing in the middle, not knowing which version of my husband was real, or which one I was supposed to mourn. I tried to pretend everything was normal. I made lunch, folded the laundry, even laughed when Sophie told me a story about her science teacher getting hit in the face with a foam rocket. But inside, I was crumbling. I kept thinking about that little boy's face, about Isabelle's soft voice and how she smiled when she looked at him. And then I'd look at Sophie, her eyes, her chin, the way she always tilted her head when she was thinking hard. And it hurt. It hurt in places I didn't know could ache. I should have told her sooner. But how do you tell your 13-year-old daughter that the father she adored might not have been the man we thought he was? I didn't get the chance to figure it out. Because that night, Sophie found the USB. I had left it plugged into my laptop by mistake. I was in the kitchen rinsing dishes when I heard her shout, "Mom!" I dropped the plate in my hand. She was standing in the living room, eyes wide, the screen behind her glowing. A photo of Daniel, with Leo. "Who is that kid?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why is Dad holding him like that's his son?" I couldn't speak. "Mom!" she yelled. "Who is he?" I walked over slowly, like my legs didn't belong to me. I sat down next to her. "Sophie, I need you to breathe, okay?" "Is he Dad's kid?" she asked, eyes filling with tears. "Do I have a brother?" "I don't know yet," I whispered. "I just found out 2 days ago." She stared at me like I'd betrayed her. "And you didn't tell me?" "I wanted to protect you," I said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. "Protect me from what? From the truth? From knowing that my dad might have lied to us? That he had another family?" My chest tightened. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" she snapped. "Because that looks like a family to me." Her voice broke on the word family, and that's when I saw it. That deep, awful wound forming behind her eyes. Not just pain, loss all over again. Only this time, it wasn't just about Daniel dying. It was about the version of him she kept alive and her heart being ripped away. She stormed upstairs before I could explain anything else. I sat there, staring at the paused image on the screen. Daniel had Leo on his shoulders, both of them laughing in the sunlight. He looked so happy. I hated him for it, and I missed him for it. Sophie didn't come down for dinner. I left her favorite mac and cheese outside her door, untouched. I could hear her crying through the wall, and every sob felt like a stab to my chest. I wanted to tell her that maybe he had a reason, that maybe he was helping them, not living some double life. But I didn't even know if that was true yet. How could I ask her to believe what I couldn't believe myself? Later that night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling. My mind kept spinning. Was Leo Daniel's son? Was Isabelle his lover? Was this some kind of arrangement he made to help a struggling mother? Or was it a betrayal in the deepest form? I didn't know. All I knew was this. My daughter was upstairs grieving a second time. And no matter how much I wanted to protect her, this truth was already changing her. Changing us. And I had no idea how to stop it. I didn't tell Sophie I was going back. She hadn't spoken to me properly since she found the USB. She barely looked up from her cereal in the mornings. I didn't push. She was angry, and she had every right to be. I was angry too. Angry at Daniel for leaving a mess he wasn't here to clean up, but the questions in my head were louder than the silence in our house. I needed answers. So, 2 days later, I drove back to Isabelle's building. This time, I parked, got out of the car, and climbed the narrow steps to her door. My hand trembled as I raised it to knock. For a second, I considered turning around and pretending I never found anything, but I had already crossed that line. The door opened after 2 knocks. She stood there in a faded blue t-shirt, her hair pulled back, eyes tired but alert. She looked at me like she recognized me immediately. "Grace?" she asked softly. I blinked. "You know who I am?" She nodded. "Yes, I thought one day you might come." For a moment, I just stood there. Her voice was gentle, not nervous, not defensive, just calm. "I need to talk," I said. She stepped aside. "Come in." Her apartment was small, warm, and quiet. Toys were stacked neatly in the corner, and a little pair of sneakers sat by the door. She led me to the kitchen, offered me tea. I said no. I couldn't sit. I couldn't breathe properly, let alone sip tea. "I found the USB," I said, folding my arms tightly. She nodded. "Is Leo Daniel's son?" I asked bluntly. She took a long breath. "No, not biologically." I stared at her, confused. She pulled out a chair and sat down. "I met Daniel at the hospital. Leo had pneumonia, I had no insurance, I was panicking. He was there visiting someone and saw me crying in the hallway." I slowly sat down across from her. "He helped me that day," she continued. "Paid for the medicine, sat with me. Gave me a card and said, 'Call if you need anything.' I didn't want to, but 2 weeks later, Leo got sick again. I called." She looked down at her hands. "I was working 2 jobs, barely surviving. I wasn't asking for pity. But Daniel, he kept showing up. He helped me find a better apartment. Bought Leo books. Food. He never asked for anything in return." "Why didn't he tell me?" I whispered. "Because he was afraid," she said. "Afraid you'd think he was cheating, that you'd see it as something ugly, but it wasn't. He never crossed any lines. He talked about you. And Sophie. all the time. I felt a strange pain in my throat. I didn't want to believe her, but there was something in her eyes, something true. "He loved you," Isabelle said quietly. "He said you were the only person who ever made him feel safe." I couldn't speak. She opened a drawer and handed me a small envelope. "He wrote this for you, said I should give it to you if you ever came." I took it with trembling fingers. "I don't want anything from you," Isabelle said. "Not money, not approval. I just wanted Leo to grow up knowing someone cared." I looked around her apartment. Nothing fancy, nothing hidden, just a woman and her child, trying to live. "I don't know what to think," I said honestly. "You don't have to decide right now," she replied, "but I think you deserve the truth. That's all Daniel ever wanted." I left holding the envelope, unsure whether I felt relief or heartbreak. Isabelle didn't look like a threat. She looked like a person my husband quietly carried in his heart. And now, I had to decide what that meant to me. I didn't open the envelope right away. I left it on the nightstand for 2 days, untouched. Every time I glanced at it, my chest tightened. There was something about Daniel's handwriting that made me feel like he was still here. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear his voice again, especially after everything I'd just learned. But on the third night, after Sophie had gone to bed and the house had gone quiet, I sat in my room and picked it up. The envelope was thin. Inside were 2 letters, one addressed to me, the other to Sophie. I held them in my lap for a moment, staring at the names. Then I unfolded mine. "Grace," it began. "If you're reading this, then I know everything is out in the open now. And I'm sorry you had to find out this way." I took a breath and kept reading. "I never wanted to keep secrets from you, but I didn't know how to tell you the truth without breaking your heart. I met Isabelle during a really strange, sad time in her life. She reminded me of someone I once knew. She wasn't asking for anything, but she needed help. And once I started helping, I couldn't walk away." His words were slow and careful, almost scared. "She never asked me to lie to you. That was my decision. I was trying to do the right thing for everyone. But I realize now it was cowardly. I should have trusted you enough to share the truth. You have always been the strongest person I know." My eyes blurred. "I didn't love her, Grace, not in the way I love you. But I loved that little boy, Leo. He brought something out of me, something I didn't even know I still had. He reminded me what it meant to be human, to care for someone just because it's right." I paused, my hand trembling. There were times I thought of telling you, so many times, but I'd look at you and Sophie and think, why risk this? Why shake what's whole? And maybe that was selfish. Maybe I just didn't want to lose what we had. I could feel the knot tightening in my throat. "Grace, you were the best part of my life, and I hope, if nothing else, you'll believe that. I didn't leave this world trying to deceive you. I left trying to protect something fragile. Maybe I went about it all wrong, but I did it out of love. I swear that." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "Tell Sophie I'm sorry, and that I love her more than she'll ever understand. I don't expect either of you to forgive me, but I hope one day you'll see that I tried to do good, even if it didn't look that way." It ended simply, "Forever yours, Daniel." I folded the letter back up, pressing it to my chest. My heart felt like it had been split open and stitched back together, clumsily, but somehow still beating. I looked at the second letter, the one for Sophie. I didn't open it. That was hers. But now I knew. Daniel had tried. He hadn't been perfect. He had lied, hidden a whole other life from us. But he hadn't done it for himself. Not entirely. The next morning, I walked into Sophie's room. She was curled up under her blanket, scrolling on her phone. "Hey," I said quietly. She glanced up. "What?" "I have something for you." I handed her the letter. She looked at it, confused. "What's this?" "From your dad," I said. "He wrote it before he passed." Her face changed instantly. She sat up and stared at the envelope like it might explode. "You don't have to read it now," I said gently. "But when you're ready, it's yours." Then I left the room, quietly closing the door behind me. Downstairs, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The ache hadn't gone away, but for the first time in weeks, it wasn't sharp. It was soft, and maybe, just maybe, I was starting to understand the man I had lost. I don't know what I expected when I brought Sophie with me that day. Maybe I hoped for a breakthrough, maybe I was being naive. She hadn't said much after reading her father's letter. Just folded it slowly, tucked it back in the envelope, and whispered, "I don't hate him, but I don't know if I trust him either." That was enough for me. I didn't push. I let her sit with it, let her grieve in her own way. Then one morning, while we were driving to the grocery store, I said quietly, "I'm going to visit Isabelle and Leo again." Sophie didn't speak at first. I kept my eyes on the road. Then she muttered, "Can I come?" I glanced at her, surprised. She looked out the window, pretending like she hadn't just said something that made my heart stop. I nodded. Of course. The silence between us was thick the entire drive. I could feel the tension rolling off her like waves. I knew she was nervous, angry, curious, and maybe scared too. When we pulled up to Isabelle's apartment, she was already outside waiting for us, holding Leo's hand. Leo peeked from behind her leg. Sophie stared straight ahead. I stepped out first. "Hi." Isabelle gave a small smile. "Hi." Sophie climbed out slowly, not saying a word. She kept her arms crossed and stayed close to the car. "This is Sophie," I said, my voice gentle. Isabelle nodded. "It's nice to meet you." Sophie didn't reply. Leo peeked at her, then whispered something to Isabelle. She bent down, nodded, and nudged him forward. He stepped out shyly. "Hi," he said softly. Sophie blinked at him. "Hi." That was it. No smiles, no handshakes, no awkward hugs, just two kids standing feet apart, trying to figure out what world they were standing in. We went inside. Isabelle had made tea. She offered juice to the kids. Leo grabbed his cup and sat at the small kitchen table. Sophie stood for a moment, unsure, then finally joined him, sitting across from him without a word. Isabelle and I sat nearby. No one spoke for a while. Then Leo pointed at Sophie's bracelet. "That's cool." Sophie looked down. "Thanks. My dad made it." Leo nodded. "Mine too." She froze. I held my breath. Sophie stared at him, confused. "What?" Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny leather bracelet, worn at the edges. The same stitching, same color, same knots. Sophie's eyes widened. "He made one for me last year," Leo said proudly. "Said I was brave." Sophie didn't speak. She just kept staring at the bracelet. Then quietly, almost like she didn't mean to say it out loud, she whispered, "He made one just like that for me when I was 6. I swallowed hard. Leo smiled. "I guess we match." Sophie didn't smile back, but she didn't look away either. That was something. Later, while Isabelle and I washed the cups, the kids sat in the living room. They didn't talk much, but I could see the walls lowering just a bit. Sophie glanced at Leo's drawing, pointed at a part of it, and he nodded. They shared a look. It lasted only a second. But I saw it. A crack in the distance between them. On the drive home, Sophie stared out the window again. After a few minutes, she spoke. "He's nice." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Yeah, he is." "I don't want to go all the time," she added quickly, "but maybe sometimes." I nodded, not wanting to push my luck. "Do you think he knows?" she asked quietly. "That Dad's gone?" I hesitated. "I don't know." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "If he doesn't know, someone should tell him." I turned my head, surprised, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something new in her eyes. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something softer. Understanding, maybe. And I knew in that moment this wasn't going to be easy, it wasn't going to be fast, but two broken pieces had just touched, and that was enough for now. It didn't happen overnight. Sophie didn't suddenly embrace Isabelle or rush to play with Leo. There were no grand speeches or warm group hugs. It was slower than that, more fragile, like watching a flower push through the cracks of a sidewalk. But something had changed. We started visiting Isabelle and Leo once a week. At first, it was just short visits, an hour at most. Isabelle would make tea, the kids would sit near each other, barely speaking. But each time we came, the silence grew less sharp. Sophie started asking Leo little questions. At first about his drawings, then about his school. And one Saturday afternoon, I caught them giggling together over a silly joke he told. Sophie tried to hide her smile, but it was there. Just for a second. The ice was melting. Isabelle and I stayed mostly quiet during those visits. We didn't try to force anything. She was patient, always offering kindness without expectation. I appreciated that. She never acted like she had a claim over anything, just grateful we were there. Sometimes I'd look at Leo and wonder if Daniel had ever imagined this moment. The two halves of his world sitting under one roof. I doubted he thought it would happen this way. But maybe some part of him had hoped. One evening, I found Sophie in the living room flipping through an old family photo album. She paused at a picture of Daniel holding her as a baby. "Do you think he felt guilty?" she asked suddenly. I sat beside her. I think he felt everything. Love, guilt, fear, maybe even shame. But I also think he was trying to do what he believed was right. She nodded slowly. Then, after a moment, "I don't hate him anymore. I just miss him in a different way now." I reached out and held her hand. "Me too." That week, Sophie asked if she could bring one of her old books to Leo, said he might like it. It was the first time she had offered anything to him. My heart swelled. We showed up to Isabelle's apartment that Saturday afternoon with cookies and the book. Leo's eyes lit up. "Thanks," he said, hugging the book to his chest. Sophie shrugged, trying to act like it wasn't a big deal. "It's not even that good, but the robot part is funny." They disappeared into Leo's room, while Isabelle and I sat on the couch, sipping tea. "You've raised a good girl," Isabelle said gently. I smiled. "You've done an amazing job with Leo." We sat in silence for a moment, a comfortable silence. "I think about Daniel a lot," she admitted. "Not like missing him the way you do, but wondering what he'd think of this. Of us." I nodded. "Me too." She looked over at me. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" I glanced toward the hallway, where faint laughter echoed from the kids' room. "Yes," I said. "It doesn't look like the family I thought I'd have, but maybe it's the one we're meant to build now." Tears welled in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away. "I never wanted to take anything from you, Grace." "You didn't," I said. "Life just gave us the same man, in different ways." Later that night, as Sophie and I were getting ready to leave, Leo ran up to her with something in his hand. "Here," he said, holding out a keychain. It was small and made of green thread. "I made it at school," he said shyly. "You can have it, if you want." Sophie blinked. Then slowly, she took it from him. "Thanks," she mumbled. I caught Isabelle watching from the kitchen doorway, a quiet smile on her lips. As we drove home, Sophie turned the keychain over in her hand. "You know," she said softly, "I think Dad would have liked that we're doing this." I smiled. I think he would too. That night, I sat by the window, watching the sky turn a deep purple. I held Daniel's old leather bracelet in my palm, the one I found in the glove compartment. the one that started it all. Our world had cracked open. But from the pieces, something new was growing. Not perfect, not simple, but real. And sometimes, that's enough.